In a residential neighborhood on the outskirts of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, stood Rachel Thompson's small two-story house. She lived quietly with her 6-year-old daughter Emma and her husband Michael while working as a nurse at the city's general hospital. Michael was an IT engineer who worked from home frequently and was a gentle father who helped take care of Emma. Emma was the kind of child who would come home from school and excitedly tell her mother about everything that had happened that day. She was a kind-hearted girl who was gentle with her friends and always tried to help anyone in trouble, which made her Rachel's pride and joy. At dinner time, the three family members would share the events of their day. Michael would help Emma with her homework, and Rachel would go to bed early to prepare for her work at the hospital the next day. This was their daily routine. Rachel's parents, Robert and Margaret, lived in a small town in New Jersey about a 2-hour drive away. Rachel tried to visit her parents with Emma at least once a month. The long drive was tiring, but seeing how much Emma looked forward to meeting her grandparents made her forget all about the fatigue. Meanwhile, Rachel's sister Jessica lived just 15 minutes by car from their parents' house. Jessica had a husband named Brad and 2 children, 8-year-old Jacob and 5-year-old Sophia. Brad worked for a local real estate company, but his income wasn't very stable. Because of this, Jessica often asked their parents for financial help. Car repair costs, children's activity fees, and sometimes even part of the rent. She seemed to take it for granted that their parents would help her out. Every time Rachel visited her parents' house, something bothered her. Jessica's children were constantly given new toys, game consoles, tablets, and other items, while Emma received treatment that amounted to little more than, "Here's some candy for you." Emma never complained and always responded with a smile saying, "Thank you," but Rachel felt a small thorn-like discomfort in her heart. Margaret loved all her grandchildren very much, but there was a clear bias in how she showed that love. She often baked homemade cookies for Jessica's children, bought them new clothes, and planned special outings for them. While she was kind to Emma, she showed little special consideration for her. When Rachel once asked her mother directly about this, Margaret replied, "Jessica's children are close by, so I tend to spoil them. I love Emma just the same." Robert had a similar attitude. When Jessica asked for financial help, he would readily agree, saying, "We're family, so it's natural to help each other." However, when Rachel consulted him about struggling with medical expenses or her mortgage, he coldly told her, "You have a stable income, so you should figure it out yourselves." Rachel had also discussed this unfair treatment with Michael. Michael was an understanding husband who gently advised her, "I understand how you feel. But as long as Emma enjoys her time with her grandparents, maybe you shouldn't think too deeply about it." Still, deep in Rachel's heart, the pain from this unequal treatment that had continued since childhood continued to smolder. From the time she was young, Jessica had been their parents' special child. She had good grades, was sociable, and was skilled at meeting their parents' expectations. Rachel was serious and responsible, but she couldn't capture her parents' attention like Jessica could. Even now as an adult, that dynamic hadn't changed. Jessica could always turn to their parents when she was in trouble, and their parents gladly accepted this. Meanwhile, Rachel was treated as an independent adult, and asking for help was seen as being spoiled. As Thanksgiving approached, Emma was genuinely looking forward to seeing her grandparents. When Emma asked, "Mom, can I write a letter to Grandpa and Grandma?" Rachel nodded with mixed feelings. Seeing Emma's pure affection sometimes made her feel ashamed of the bitter emotions in her own heart. Still, she sincerely wished to protect her daughter from being hurt. On Thanksgiving morning, Emma woke up early and looked out the window. "Mom, I get to see Grandpa and Grandma today," she murmured happily while putting on the prettiest dress she had chosen herself. The light pink dress was last Christmas's present and Emma's favorite. Rachel looked at her daughter's innocent smile and prayed from her heart that the day would pass peacefully. During the car ride to New Jersey, Emma sat in the back seat rereading her letter to her grandparents. It said, "Dear Grandpa and Grandma, thank you for everything. I'm really looking forward to seeing you today. I've been helping Mom a lot, so please praise me." Michael smiled at Rachel while driving and said, "Emma really is a good child." When they arrived at her parents' house, Jessica's family car was already parked in the driveway. When the front door opened, Margaret greeted them with a smile. "Oh, Emma, what a pretty dress," she said kindly while hugging Emma. Emma happily hugged her grandmother back and said, "Grandma, I missed you." When they entered the living room, Jessica's children Jacob and Sophia were playing with new tablets. The screens displayed the latest games, and the two were absorbed in moving their fingers. On the sofa, several new toys still in their boxes were placed. Large Lego sets, a dollhouse, electric toy cars, everything looked expensive. "Grandpa and Grandma bought these for us," Sophia proudly showed Emma. Emma's eyes lit up as she said, "That's amazing," but she seemed to notice that there was nothing for her. Rachel watched the scene with a tightening feeling in her chest. Robert came out of his study and shook hands with Michael. "How's work going?" he asked in a friendly tone. While Michael was reporting on recent developments, Robert lightly patted Emma's head and asked, "Have you been doing well?" Emma nodded happily and held out her letter. "I wrote a letter for Grandpa," she said, and Robert replied, "Thank you, I'll read it later," putting the letter in his pocket. When dinner preparations began, Margaret was busy in the kitchen preparing the turkey. Rachel tried to help, but was declined with, "You're tired, just sit down." Meanwhile, Jessica was relaxing in the living room with her children. "Mom, can you take us to the shopping mall next weekend?" Jessica asked Margaret, who readily responded, "Of course, is there something you want?" Emma was reading a picture book by herself, but occasionally glanced toward her cousins. Rachel could painfully see that she was looking enviously at the two playing with their new toys. "Emma, why don't you come over here and play with us?" Rachel called out, but Emma shook her head and answered, "It's okay, this book is interesting." She seemed to be considerate beyond what you'd expect from a 6-year-old. When dinner time came, the entire family gathered around the large dining table. Robert offered a Thanksgiving prayer, and everyone said Amen together. Traditional Thanksgiving dishes were laid out: turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and more. Margaret's cooking skills were as wonderful as ever, and everyone enjoyed the delicious meal. The conversation during the meal was mainly dominated by talk about Jessica's children. Jacob scoring a goal for his soccer team, Sophia playing well at her piano recital, Robert and Margaret listened happily to stories about their grandchildren. "Jacob has a soccer game next month. Will you come cheer for him?" Jessica asked her parents, and Robert immediately replied, "Of course we'll go." Emma also tried to talk about events at school, but she couldn't find an opening in the conversation. When Rachel tried to encourage Emma to speak, Sophia happened to start talking loudly about her new toys, and Emma's small voice was drowned out. Emma gave up and continued eating quietly. When dessert time came, Margaret cut and served homemade apple pie. She gave Jacob and Sophia large pieces and Emma a slightly smaller piece. It was a small thing, but Rachel noticed the difference. Emma ate the pie looking like she enjoyed it without saying anything, but Rachel's heart was complicated. After the meal, the children began playing in the living room. Jessica was talking with her parents about household finances. "Actually, my car inspection is next month, and it looks like it's going to cost more than I thought," Jessica said with a troubled expression, and Robert asked worriedly, "About how much will it cost?" When she answered, "Probably around $1,000, Robert immediately offered, "Then don't worry about it, we'll pay for it." Rachel quietly listened to this conversation. She remembered that they had also had unexpected expenses last month for Emma's medical costs. When Emma had a fever and they visited the emergency room, there were parts not covered by insurance, requiring about $800 in payment. At that time, Rachel had considered consulting her parents, but in the end they managed it themselves. As they were leaving, Margaret brought a small bag from the kitchen. It contained a few pieces of candy. "Emma, this is for you," she said, handing over the bag. Emma happily said, "Thank you, Grandma," and accepted the bag. Meanwhile, Jacob and Sophia were each given toys in large boxes. When getting into the car, Emma held the candy bag carefully in the back seat. "Grandma's candy is sweet and delicious," she murmured contentedly. Rachel was moved by her daughter's purity while also feeling intense anger. Michael seemed to notice too, looking at Rachel with concern through the rearview mirror. On the way home, Emma fell asleep from exhaustion. In the quiet car, Rachel spoke to Michael in a small voice. "Did you see what happened today?" Michael nodded and answered, "I understand how you feel." But Emma seemed happy. That's what hurts the most. Emma is starting to think that treatment is normal, Rachel said while holding back tears. That night, after putting Emma to bed, Rachel and Michael talked for a long time in the kitchen. If this continues, Emma will think she's not loved, Rachel expressed her concern, and Michael gently replied, but I think your parents love Emma in their own way. However, in Rachel's heart, the scenes from today kept replaying. When December arrived, Emma was very busy preparing for Christmas. After coming home from school, she made Christmas cards and handmade ornaments almost every day. Mom, I can see Grandpa and Grandma again this year, right? Emma asked with expectant eyes, and Rachel smiled and answered, of course. Emma clapped her hands happily and said excitedly, I'm going to make a special present this year. What Emma was making was a handmade photo album for her grandparents. She was earnestly gluing together pictures she had drawn and family photos they had taken. Do you think Grandpa and Grandma will be happy? Emma asked anxiously, and Rachel encouraged her, I'm sure it will be the most wonderful present in the world. Michael also gently patted his daughter's head and said, because it's filled with Emma's love. On the night of December 15th, Rachel's cell phone rang. It was from her mother Margaret. After a cheerful greeting of Rachel, how are you doing, her tone became somewhat apologetic. Actually, I talked it over with your father, but we can't afford to buy presents this Christmas. Living on a pension, we have more expenses than we thought. Rachel was speechless for a moment. She was remembering the numerous expensive presents for Jacob and Sophia that she had seen at Thanksgiving. I see, I understand, Rachel answered quietly. Margaret continued, but let's all have Christmas dinner together. That's what matters most, right? After hanging up, Rachel told Michael what the conversation was about. Michael frowned and started to say, but at Thanksgiving. But Rachel shook her head and interrupted him. I know. But let's explain it differently to Emma. The next morning, Rachel gently explained to Emma. Grandpa and Grandma called. This Christmas, they want to treasure the time we spend together rather than presents. Emma thought for a moment, then showed a bright smile. That's a good idea. Even without presents, I'm happy just to see Grandpa and Grandma. Rachel's heart warmed at Emma's reaction. She was surprised that a 6-year-old child could be so understanding, and at the same time felt sorry. You really are a good child, Emma, Rachel said, hugging her, and Emma replied, Mom, I'm happy even if I'm not rich. Because I have you and Dad. Those words almost brought Rachel to tears. That weekend, Emma put even more effort into making presents for her grandparents. Even without spending money, things made with heart are more valuable, that's what my teacher said, Emma said while carefully drawing with colored pencils. Rachel watched her daughter and was moved by how mature she was. On the night of December 22nd, Rachel was casually checking social media on her smartphone. As usual, she was looking at her friends' Christmas posts when Jessica's post caught her eye. The post was titled, Christmas Bonus from Mom and Dad, with a row of Christmas tree emojis. When she scrolled through the photos, Rachel gasped. There was a photo of Jessica's family and her parents toasting in a private room at an upscale restaurant. Obviously expensive dishes were arranged on the table. The next photo showed a mountain of presents. New game consoles, brand-name children's clothes, expensive toys, and even adult watches and accessories. Everything was clearly high-priced even without seeing price tags. The post's caption read, Once again this year, our parents spoiled our family. The kids are overjoyed. My husband and I got wonderful presents too. We're truly grateful. Family is wonderful. The comment section was filled with responses from friends like, what a lovely family, I'm so envious, and your children look so happy. Rachel stared at the screen, unable to move. She could feel her hands shaking. Just a few days ago, the parents who had said they couldn't afford to buy presents had spent money lavishly on Jessica's family. Just the cost of the meal at the upscale restaurant would have been more than enough to buy a small present for Emma. At that moment, Emma appeared in the living room in her pajamas. Mom, I came to get some water, she said, sitting next to Rachel. Seeing the screen, Emma said happily, oh, that's Sophia and Jacob. There are so many amazing presents, Emma murmured innocently, and Rachel hurriedly tried to close her smartphone. However, Emma looked at the screen once more and asked in a small voice, "Mom, when is this photo from?" Rachel was at a loss for an answer. When she honestly replied, "Very recently," Emma looked thoughtful. Then, in a very small voice, she murmured, "Mom, did I get forgotten?" Those words pierced Rachel's heart. She could see tears welling up in Emma's eyes, but she was desperately trying to hold them back. Grandpa and Grandma said they don't have money so they can't buy presents, but why do Sophia and Jacob have so many? Emma's voice was trembling. Rachel hugged Emma and desperately tried to comfort her, "You're definitely not forgotten." But Emma said in a tearful voice, "But I don't have anything. Did I do something bad? I always try to be a good girl, so why am I the only one who's different?" At that moment, something definitively changed in Rachel's heart. Seeing her daughter's pure questions and sadness, she was convinced that she couldn't remain silent any longer. Emma had done nothing wrong. She was simply the victim of the adult's selfish behavior. "Emma, you are the most precious child in the world," Rachel said, looking into her daughter's eyes. "And Mommy will definitely make things right." Emma nodded slightly and honestly shared her feelings. "Mom, I'm okay, because I have you and Dad. But I'm a little sad." That night, after putting Emma to bed, Rachel told Michael everything that had happened that day. Michael also saw the post and couldn't hide his anger. "This is too terrible. To think that Emma was hurt like this," he raised his voice. Rachel said quietly but with firm resolve, "I've decided. I'm going to give them the ultimate gift." Michael sensed an extraordinary determination in his wife's expression. "What are you planning to do?" he asked, and Rachel answered, "I'm going to teach them the truth. What real family love is, and what they're about to lose." That night, Rachel couldn't sleep at all. The years of accumulated unfairness, her daughter's pure sadness, and her parents' hypocritical attitude all swirled in her head. By morning, Rachel's resolve had strengthened even more. This Christmas would be an unforgettable day for the Montgomery family. When Emma said at the breakfast table, "Mom, I'm going to work on Grandpa and Grandma's present today too," Rachel smiled and answered, "Yes, I'm sure they'll be happy." However, in her heart she was thinking something completely different. The present Rachel was preparing would be the opposite of Emma's loving creation, something that would confront them with harsh reality. Still, for her daughter's sake, Rachel was prepared to do anything. From the next day, Rachel began organizing 20 years' worth of records. She pulled out old file boxes, account books from her college days, memos recording exchanges with her parents, and most importantly, details of the financial assistance Jessica had received from their parents. Rachel had a meticulous personality and a habit of keeping detailed records of family interactions. This was about to be useful in an unexpected way. Continuing calculations until late at night, surprising numbers emerged. Over the past 20 years, the total assistance Jessica had received from their parents amounted to approximately $180,000. Car down payments, house repair costs, children's education expenses, medical bills, and countless emergency assistance. Each instance was hundreds to thousands of dollars, but accumulated it became an enormous sum. Meanwhile, the assistance Rachel had received from her parents was only $500 for her college graduation gift. Wedding expenses, house down payment, Emma's birth costs, they had covered everything themselves. The parents' words about helping each other in times of trouble were rules that applied only to Jessica. When Michael came home late that night, Rachel showed him the calculation results. "Look at this," Rachel said, handing him papers with detailed amounts and dates. Michael's eyes widened as he murmured, "This is terrible. Seeing the numbers makes it even clearer how unfairly you've been treated." The next day, Rachel visited a law office. A lawyer named Tom Harrison listened to Rachel's situation and nodded deeply. "Legally, it's often difficult to demand repayment of things processed as gifts, but your case is special," Tom explained. "There's clear unfairness, detailed records, and it seems no gift contracts were created for recent assistance." Rachel honestly confided, "I don't really want the money. I just want them to know the truth." Tom showed understanding and suggested, then let's create repayment demand documents and start by setting up a place for discussion. By applying legal pressure, they'll have no choice but to accept reality. On Christmas Eve morning, Rachel headed to her parents' house with a heavy envelope. Emma sat in the back seat, carefully holding her completed photo album. "Mom, do you think Grandpa and Grandma will be happy with my present?" Emma asked anxiously, and Rachel answered, "I'm sure they'll think it's the most wonderful present in the world." When they arrived at her parents' house, Jessica's family was already there. In the living room, there was another mountain of new presents. Jacob and Sophia were excitedly playing with a new game console. On the sofa were several new toys still in their boxes. Large Lego sets, a dollhouse, electric toy cars, everything looked expensive. "Grandpa and Grandma bought them for us," Sophia proudly showed Emma. Emma's eyes sparkled as she said, "That's amazing," but she seemed to realize there was nothing for her. Rachel watched the scene with a tightening feeling in her chest. Margaret hugged Emma and said, "Emma, I'm so happy to see you again this year." Emma happily replied, "Grandma, me too." I made a special present, and offered her handmade photo album. Margaret took it and said, "Oh, thank you. I'll look at it later," and placed it on a side table. Meanwhile, the presents from Jessica's children were immediately praised excessively and put on the refrigerator. Seeing this difference, Rachel's resolve strengthened even more. During dinner preparations, Rachel approached her father Robert. "I have something to discuss. Could you spare some time in your study?" Robert looked somewhat confused but answered, "All right." In the study, Rachel placed the heavy envelope on Robert's desk. "What is this?" Robert asked, and Rachel quietly answered, "Records from the past 20 years. And documents from a lawyer." When Robert opened the envelope, his face suddenly turned pale. The first thing that came out was a detailed list of amounts. The complete record of assistance to Jessica and the contrast with the minimal assistance Rachel had received was clearly shown. Next came an official repayment demand letter from the lawyer. What is the meaning of this?" Robert asked in a trembling voice. Rachel calmly answered, "I wanted you to know the truth. We are reclassifying the gifts you gave Jessica as loans legally, and demanding repayment." Robert stood up and shouted, "Is this what family does? Are you planning to sue your own sister?" Rachel calmly replied, "Precisely because we're family, shouldn't we be fair? Saying you can't afford to buy Emma a present, then spending thousands of dollars on Jessica's family a few days later. Is that what family does?" At that moment, Margaret hurriedly entered the study. "What's happening?" "I heard loud voices," she asked worriedly. Robert showed Margaret the documents and explained, "Rachel hired a lawyer and plans to sue us." Margaret read the documents and sank into a chair. "Rachel, are you serious?" she asked in a trembling voice. Rachel answered, "When Emma cried and said, 'Did I get forgotten?' my mind was made up." At that moment, Emma's small voice was heard. "Mom? What's wrong?" Emma stood worriedly at the entrance to the study. In her hand, she held another present for her grandparents. A small envelope. "Grandpa, Grandma, I made this too," Emma said, offering the envelope which contained a letter. Robert opened it with trembling hands to find a letter written in Emma's careful handwriting. "To Grandpa and Grandma. Thank you for everything. I'm totally fine without presents. But sometimes I worry whether Grandpa and Grandma love me. I try to be a good girl. If I did something bad, please tell me. I'll fix it. I love Grandpa and Grandma very much. From Emma." After reading the letter, Robert and Margaret choked up. Margaret said tearfully, "Emma, you haven't done anything bad at all." Robert also answered in a trembling voice, "Grandpa and Grandma love you very much." Emma looked relieved and asked purely, "Really? Then why don't I have presents?" At that moment, both parents completely understood what they had been doing. Margaret hugged Emma and said, "I'm sorry, Emma. Grandma and Grandpa were wrong." Robert also said with tears in his eyes, "You are our precious granddaughter. We were wrong to forget that." Rachel felt somewhat relieved seeing her parents change. A lawsuit isn't what I really want, she said. I just want Emma to be loved fairly. That night, when the entire family gathered for Christmas dinner, the atmosphere had clearly changed. The parents listened eagerly to Emma's stories and praised her handmade presents repeatedly. Jessica seemed unhappy but said nothing. As they were leaving, Robert suggested to Rachel, "We need to talk. Can we meet next week, without lawyers?" Rachel nodded and answered, "That's a good idea." In the car, Emma was talking happily. "Today was fun. Grandpa and Grandma listened to my stories a lot." Rachel looked at her daughter's smile while reflecting on the day's events. Telling the truth had been painful, but Emma's pure love had moved her parents' hearts. A week after the new year, Robert and Margaret visited Rachel's house. Both looked tired but had determination in their eyes. Emma was at school, so the adults could talk slowly by themselves. "Rachel, we talked for a long time," Robert began. "You were right. We were wrong." Margaret also continued tearfully, "Because Jessica lives nearby, we tended to spoil her. But we never realized we were hurting you and Emma." Rachel quietly listened to her parents' words. "I read Emma's letter over and over," Margaret said in a trembling voice. "I really understood how much that child loves us, and how we haven't responded to that love." Robert took out an envelope. "This is a check. I want to give you $90,000, half of the assistance we gave Jessica." Rachel was surprised and answered, "I can't accept such a large sum. What I wanted wasn't money. Just fair affection." Margaret pleaded, "But please accept it as Emma's college fund. It's our way of apologizing." Rachel thought for a long time, then said, "Then let's deposit it as an educational fund in Emma's name. But I have a condition. From now on, please treat all your grandchildren equally." That promise was kept. Jessica was furious about the repayment demand, and her relationship with her parents deteriorated for a while. "Are you abandoning me?" she cried and pleaded, but Robert firmly answered, "We're not abandoning you. We're just being fair. You're an independent adult too." By spring, the change was obvious. The parents began actively participating in Emma's school events and genuinely rejoiced in her small growth. They put Emma's drawings on the refrigerator, listened eagerly to her stories, and prepared heartfelt presents for her birthday. Repairing the relationship with Jessica took time. At first, she blamed Rachel for destroying the family, but gradually began to recognize her own dependency. When her husband Brad changed jobs and their income stabilized, Jessica also began to refrain from relying on their parents. At a summer barbecue party, when the entire family gathered for the first time in a while, the atmosphere was completely different from before. Emma, Jacob, and Sophia shared toys equally, and Robert and Margaret paid equal attention to all three grandchildren. "Grandma, look at the craft I made," Emma happily showed a clay doll, and Margaret genuinely praised it, saying, "That's very well done. I'll display it in my room." Next to her, Jacob's drawing was praised in the same way. Rachel sat next to Michael, quietly watching this change. "What you did was right," Michael said quietly. "Look at Emma. She's much more confident than before." Emma had indeed changed. Since becoming confident that her grandparents loved her, she had become more active in speaking and smiled more often. Seeing Emma innocently say, "I love Grandpa and Grandma," Rachel felt truly relieved. One autumn day, Jessica called Rachel for the first time in a while. "Big sister, thank you," she said. "I was angry at first, but now I understand. I was too dependent on our parents. And I was doing something inexcusable to you and Emma." Rachel answered, "We're family. No family is perfect, but we can cherish each other." Jessica said tearfully, "Let's all spend this Thanksgiving together. I'll make the turkey." That Christmas, Emma received a handmade dollhouse from her grandparents. It was something Robert had worked hard to make, with love poured into every detail. Emma's eyes lit up as she asked, "Grandpa, did you make this for me?" "That's right, it's Emma's special house," Robert answered, and Emma jumped with joy. Rachel watched the scene and thought, a real family isn't just about blood relations. It's built on caring for each other and loving each other fairly. Sometimes it's necessary to confront harsh truths, but ultimately love heals everything. When Emma was playing with the dollhouse and said, "Mom, I'm looking forward to next Christmas too," Rachel smiled and answered, "Yes, I'm sure it will be a wonderful Christmas." Perhaps the family bond had become stronger than before precisely because it had once nearly broken.